Hello, Code It Live fans. How are you all today? How are you doing, Andy?
Great. Thanks, Ed. Thanks for having me on. And hello, everyone out there.
So today we're going to be talking about Telerik Test Studio and how to test our Blazor applications with Telerik Test Studio. And we have our expert Andy here with us to show us the way. I'm still new. I still think I'm very new to Telerik Test Studio. I've used it a few times in production, and I like to talk about it a lot. But there's so much involved with this tool. It goes so deep. I just feel like I can never learn it all. And I always come to you for answers, Andy, and you always have them. So hopefully you can show us some new stuff today. I know we have some new features to talk about and a webinar coming up.
That's right. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Actually, webinar is going to be this Thursday, the 26th, I believe, somewhere around 11 Eastern. We'll get some info out for you guys. But yeah, welcome everybody to our Pest Control Monday on our debugging and testing topic. And it reminds me, this topic title reminds me of a live event I did once as a speaker, where we had a room full of people talking about Test Studio, and I said we're gonna have a live bug bash, and I had in the hotel there, I had the ice bucket from the room covered in plastic and tape and do not handle with care, stuff like that, right? And said we're gonna have a live bug bash, and they started ripping it open and telling people that we had these hornets that were going to come out, and they were going to have to help us fix the hornets, right? So, or kill the hornets and catch the bugs. Essentially, it was a great way to get everybody interested very quickly in what I was talking about. Obviously, there was no real bugs in the ice bucket, but that's a great memory. A lot of people bring that up when we go to shows.
We'll have to get you some like plastic bugs for next time. And just as we started here, Andy, it looks like we got a raid of 100 and hang on, I had it here a second ago. 161 viewers came in from the Visual Studio channel. I think that might have been Jeff Fritz that was streaming on the VS channel. He was talking about basics with C#. So this is like the perfect audience to come raid us right now, because we're going to be talking about Visual Studio also, and Blazor We'll probably use the Test Studio standalone app, but it's worth pointing out that we can do this from within Visual Studio as well.
Definitely. Yeah, Test Studio gives you that ability. Really, we say, everybody has a seat at the table when it comes to testing and Test Studio, and we really wanted to make it available in the environment that you're familiar with and comfortable with. That means for our manual testers and non-technical users, they use our standalone environment, and largely can do most of what they need to do without code. And then, of course, our more developer testers who are living in Visual Studio all day can take advantage of our Visual Studio plugin, and of course, sync up across source control and all of those things as well.
So Jeff's looking at using a Test Studio with his ClipTalk Blazor application. So you can pick up some tips here today, Jeff, and we'd be glad to help you with anything you need with that as well. So Andy, you want me to bring up the screen share? We can get into
Sure.
some code and testing in the app and whatnot.
Definitely. Great. Yep. Looks like we got it up on screen. I'll do my best here to do some zooming as well, but just to give you guys a bit of a look around Test Studio, it does lay out much like you may be familiar with in Visual Studio with the different panels. They are dockable panels. You can really manipulate and pin back and so forth your environment. I really think of this as a testing workshop, where you've got tools around that workshop to do different jobs. And that's kind of the way Test Studio's environment is. There's tools are hanging around the walls here that do different things for you, depending on the focus of what you're doing, whether you're creating a test or doing maintenance on a test, or looking to build some test lists, or just looking at results and things like that. So we've tried to make it approachable and easy to use. Um, you know, to give you just a view, a little bit closer view, I should say. We'll use our zoom here. As you can see, we've got our tests and project kind of area up on top here. You can tab through things as well to get to where you need to be. Here in the foreground, you can see I've got multiple test tabs open. So Test Studio gives you this really great ability to record and execute and edit and kind of stay in the moment. There are a lot of tools. You capture something or you build a test, you create a test, and then you execute the test, and then you go back and you troubleshoot. And it can be an exhaustive process, especially when you're having to reset the environment or come up with different variables every time, things like that slow testing down. With Test Studio, you can really jump in and kind of stay in the moment and troubleshoot things kind of on the fly. So I'll show you some of that as well. Um, we'll jump right in here, just show you this test that I have. And I like to show off the fact that Test Studio, we've surfaced a lot of functionality into the interface so that the non-technical users can use it as well as the technical users, right? So code is not necessarily required for a lot of the testing we do. And typically, I'd say our customers typically have about 80 to 90% of their tests codeless, right? Especially from a regression testing standpoint. Those can be created and continued to be maintained. And here, as you can see, I'm showing what it looks like to look at the step properties of a particular step. So if I open up that verify text contains, this is an assertion step. I'll show you how we can easily add these into our test. But you have compare type moderators you can work with and different options there, different segments you could target. Obviously the string that you're expecting, some timing adjustments. So a lot that's right there for the non-technical users to be able to manipulate without actually having to write any code, essentially.
And if you don't mind, if we could take a look at step one as well, that's just the URL that you're navigating to. So as you pointed out earlier, you don't necessarily have to be the coder. You could be the QA person in this. And this is a demo that's running on a live site. So this isn't like you've downloaded source code through GitHub and ran it on your local machine or anything. You're going right out to the live website on the internet and testing it right there.
Yep, that's right. We're working through the browsers, really mimicking what the users do in the application. So, want to see what it looks like? when we do some
Absolutely.
executing. Awesome.
And one more quick note there, you can replace that URL on the fly as well. So if you want to run tests against maybe a dev server and a production server or different versions of the app, etc., you can just swap those out really easily.
Yeah. That's a good point too, Ed. Actually, jump into test list real quick. You may have um, test lists, and test lists, when you create a test list, it's just an organization of tests, right? So you could reuse the same tests. In fact, both of these test lists have the same exact tests in them. We're not duplicating anything, but one is pointing at a staging environment and one is pointing at a production environment. So reusing those tests across the different phases of deployment, to your point, you can have that very easily. You can manipulate that here in the navigate setting, but even better and easier in that long run is having test lists that are ready to fire against those environments. And you can even have test lists that maintain themselves, dynamic test lists. So that's a pretty cool feature of ours.
Yeah, I've used that to test different versions of the same app running in different versions of .NET. So I had a .NET 5 app and a .NET 6 app, and I wanted to test them both to make sure my components were compatible across both versions of .NET, and that worked like a charm.
Yeah, and that's actually a great point to the fact that we've added that support for the latest .NET versions, .NET 5 and preview of 6, that you can now work with and use Test Studio to test. So continuing our staying up with the times and up with the game. We're always keeping up with the browsers as well as all the technologies that come along. So
And while you load that up, I'm going to share a link with chat as well, so they can see the live Blazor site that you're testing. They won't obviously have the test capabilities that you're seeing on screen, but at least they can see what the app is and play around with it in the browser.
perfect. Wanted to point out as I'm going to execute here, the different browsers, our tests are cross-browser compatible because of the way we use our find logic strategies and image-based options, which I'll show you. Our tests are very robust and can work across multiple browsers, so you don't have to have different tests for different browsers. But I also wanted to point out something new here is headless. We've added headless execution for Chrome headless. Really, really speeds up execution, especially when you're integrating Test Studio tests into a pipeline build. That way you can get really 300x speed is what we're seeing from headless versus
Oh, wow.
the headed. Yeah. So I'll go through a quick run here. I also have my annotations turned on. This little toggle button up here that's hiding up on top, it's going to kind of give us a play-by-play as things execute here. So you see it spin up the browser. And here we have our Blazing Coffee warehouse. Some verification points too, and we'll jump in and show you how some of this recording takes place. But as you can see with a little modal like that and drop downs, you can easily interact with those. Very, very expensive tea cozy here. I wasn't quite sure if they spell it with an EY or just a Y, or who knows. I could have that completely wrong. But we had some success. So as you can see, nice green banner at the top lets us know everything passed. We also have this toggle now where you can actually potentially you might have more than one failing test step in a given test. So this is an easy way to just filter out the ones that are passing, because really we want to focus in on the failure. This time we didn't get any failures, but I tell you what, we'll make sure we do so that we can see what happens then. But the team has also been working on updating and advancing our image quality, and the images that go with Test Studio. So we have a execution state image as well as the expected state image, right? So this actually is a very important part of seeing failures and identifying failures that Test Studio keeps track of for you, automatically capturing these images along the way and giving you that great comparison, right? So ideally, it's like this where they do match, right? But if they're off, that gives you some clues as to maybe what happened with your test.
That could be really helpful in like a cross-browser scenario where one browser is rendering the image differently than another, but maybe semantically, things are coming up right, but the images don't quite match up.
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's break this thing. If we were to, let's say we take out this manage products test step, right? I can easily just delete that step, or in this case, I'll just toggle it off. And that way it'll simply skip that test step and attempt to make the next step work. So if we go in and execute, and actually I'm going to execute this in a different way too. In a way, I would typically enter, uh, maybe a troubleshooting mode. Maybe I already know this test is broken, but I'm not quite sure where. I might just go to the last step of the test, and using my right click option, I have a run to here. And this will put us into a live record mode as well. So if there's a failure along the way, Test Studio will stop and attach the recorder, and then we'll be able to do some troubleshooting right on the fly as well. And then we'll also get the run from here and run selected steps as well. So here we go. We'll jump in. I'm going to pick on Chromium Edge. I do a lot of testing with Chromium Edge. We had 0-day support for Chromium Edge, by the way. All right, so we'll watch this execute again. And here it is. It didn't click the Manage Products button since we turned that step off. And now we are basically looking for that Blazor button to click it. Now, the way Test Studio looks for things is based off of its element properties. So I'll show you what that looks like for Manage Products in a moment. But secondarily, we can look for an element based off of its image as well. So you have a combination, and this is something that's patented, where we have the combination of element logic plus image. Some tools just use image, and some tools use paths and things like that. Sometimes they do attempt to use the similar property type of approach that we use, but we're really best in class by using both and having both to keep your test more robust and keep them running correctly. So let's see what we got. Back over here now, we see that red right away, easy to tell something went wrong, right? We have that filter too if we just want to filter down to the multiple, if there are multiple failed steps. Some people would say, well, how can you have multiple failed steps? You do have the ability to set a test or a test step as a continue on failure. That's this little toggle column here. And that way you actually may have more than one test step fail. It will gather failure information for each failure as well. So pretty cool little trick there. But back on the failing step itself, you can see this whole section below, we've really done a lot of work on, and kudos to our team for really engaging with our customers to get their feedback on, what to do, how to make it better. So this really helps you see the step that failed, the exception details there. We have a complete test log here that gives us really the steps to reproduce the issue, uh, as well as some of the failure information and timing.
That's helpful too for developers that you need to communicate with.
Exactly. And if that's the case, we even make that easy for you as well. You can have your bug tracking tool connected directly up. So it could just be a simple button click. If I've determined this is something I need some development help with, I can click that button. It populates everything for me. And mine says TFS here, but it's actually going to Azure DevOps in this case. And I can submit that in directly to my team. So I just created bug 215, and automatically it sent them the log files, the image files, and the page DOM at the point of failure as well. So great feedback loop from QA back to development.
It cuts down on like a lot of manual redundancy too, with having to, open up a template and paste all this stuff in individually.
Definitely. Really makes it easy. There's even an auto submit option. I'd say most people don't auto submit. It's up to you, but most of
Mhm.
our users like to review a bug and then choose to submit it, because it could be a test that's at fault, right? And that's where our resolve failure comes in. It's assuming the test is at fault. So that's going to give me some options to fix it. Down below in the suggestions, this is also part of the new addition from the team. Uh, since it was a failure to locate an element, you can see here the unable to locate an element. It went ahead and gave us some suggestions, like update the find logic for the element, right? Or maybe we'll run it again with annotations turned on. Things like that that are going to help us either better diagnose it or potentially fix the problem. So if we do update find logic, this shows me how that element is being identified to begin with. And as you can see, the class, it's a Kendo K button kind of class there. The Telerik Blazor class is here as well. And it looks like it's using a group index in this case. So this kind of common combination of things is what it's using to find the element. Now we also have a kind of stored section, really the DOM at the point of failure too, that you can validate against. So I could do some corrections here and validate to see if I can recover that. Obviously, there's no suggestions here this time because, as we know, we kind of created this problem, right? So
Hmm.
we never got to that step. And actually, the best clue from that is looking at these images here. And let me just take you in a little closer. The expected state and the failed state are different, right? That's a great clue that, hey, we never got off of this screen into this screen. So it must be something that happened, leading up to that. And that's kind of the mentality you want to approach this with is, okay, if it's not here, let me look in the steps before that and see if there was something that caused that, right? And that might lead me to find out that, oh, I'm missing this crucial step where it clicks on the manage products link.
So another thing that I like to add to my tests when I'm doing Blazor apps is I often have a little bit of like JavaScript interrupt that runs on certain pages. And if you go into the manual step builder, you can add a step to look for JavaScript errors.
Yes,
And
that's a
I think
great
that
one.
is it's a really handy thing to have in almost all tests.
Yeah, it basically looks for all of them except, or unless you exclude them, I guess is kind of the way we approach that. So yeah, that's a great little test step that you can just grab from the step builder. And that's the whole idea of the step builder is getting those things added to your test that, kind of more common. And of course, this is the common section of the step builder. So things like clearing the cache or maximizing the browser or even just doing a browser capture if you wanted to, or desktop capture for that matter. Another recent addition was we do have the ability now to automate PDFs, local PDF files, and inspect them in a way that most tools I've seen don't have the ability. Like obviously, it's PDFs are typically more of a black box where you kind of have an SVG or a Canvas type of environment, and we can't see things inside of it. Well, this allows you to do that. It allows you to get inside of those SVGs, those canvases, and find all of the different components of that PDF and treat it basically like a web page, and do all of the automation that you would want to do on that.
Yeah, because I think essentially a PDF has its own DOM, and you already have a tool that can traverse a DOM and test it. So it seems like a natural fit.
Definitely, definitely. So we're back. Actually, we never left, but we're actually still in this live record mode. So I wanted to kind of come back over here. We'll kind of share the screen a little bit, and of course, as I'm manipulating the layout, right? A lot of those tools that typically use things like paths and stuff like that, those would actually fail even just by me changing this layout. But Test Studio does have that fine logic where it can go find the button no matter where the button might go. And then secondarily, if it needs to, it has the element image as well. So um,
Yeah, that was
jump
something
back.
I was going to ask you about this page because those are actually tiles, those menu items, and you can drag and drop those as a user, and it will save the locations of those tiles.
Oh, nice.
So if
We
I were to move those tiles around, I don't want to necessarily break my test.
That's a great point. Yeah, the element image you can see is stored here, right? When we click on that, it's
Hmm.
also really the element itself is stored in our element repository, and we make it easy to connect the dots, right? So if I click on a step, I see the element image, and it's also highlighting the element in our element library over here. So really from here, and even the float over tooltip, you can see that image and you can get that visual, inspection that, oh, this is what it looks like in the UI. Um, you can also click in and edit that image. So if you needed to update it, there's tools up here to upload a new file or go to the live browser and select it, um, and to validate the image and things like that. So lots of cool stuff. And then you can also flip over in between that and the element find logic here as well. So real easy to jump back and forth and leverage both of these things too, so that if the find logic doesn't find the element, the image logic will kick in and attempt to find the element as a backup search. So that keeps your test running, and that would not fail. That would give you a warning letting you know you might need to fix a broken element, but it would pass the test if it was able to find it by its image. It will still act on it and still continue the test. So that keeps those small movements, those small changes, from breaking your test. All right, so let's see. We've got this element here. We can jump back to the test, and again, you can move between sort of recording and editing. Tweaking some steps over here. Maybe we want to add something in. We'll go ahead and just run this selected step on the fly here, and we'll make sure that it is working the way we expect it to work. And there you can see it is clicking into that. Great, we're able to do that. It passed over here too. So we've troubleshot that. Maybe we want to add something in to make this test more robust. I might add something in here, especially when I went from the menu screen to now being on this screen. I might want to add a verification. So with my recording marker there, I'm in the right spot. I can go over here and use my highlighting tool and say, okay, let's make sure maybe this manage products comes up. So with this element highlighter, you toggle it on, you add some verifications in, is it visible? Does it exist? Does it say manage products? You can see we even have some OCR options in there too. If you needed to, for instance, this can see the text content. So I don't need the OCR in this case, but let's say I wanted to draw some text out of an image and verify it. That's what this OCR function is useful for. Cool. Do you go into the advanced toolbar much ever, Ed?
No, I don't, because I don't know what's in there. I'm not an advanced user yet.
We'll get you there. But just so you know, I mean, there's really a lot of layers to Test Studio. There's training. There's a lot of resources as well. So getting familiar with it takes a little bit, but it's a pretty small learning curve, especially given the fact that we're not requiring people to learn a new language or even code in majority of what testing we do. And then when it does come to code, you've got the option of C# or VB.NET. So very comfortable coding, lots of options and things out there that you can go find examples of, and stay comfortable in what you already know, right?
What are some of the differences in what we're seeing here between what is a verify versus wait versus extract?
So a wait is going to give you, really a single function. Wait for the element to exist. Whereas a verify it's visible has to first make sure it exists and then see if it's visible on the UI. So there's some differences there, not only in how many operations it does, but also in timing. A
Mhm.
verification does have a default of 15-second timeout, and we use these timeouts so that the test can go as fast as the application allows. But the
Mhm.
timeouts give us that extra space in case we've got a slower environment or there's other things that are keeping it from running super fast, I guess.
So if I have like a long running data service in the background, I'm waiting for it to fetch like some set of data. I might want to use a wait for an element.
Yeah, exactly. You could say, wait for it to even be enabled, right? So something could exist, but it might not be visible. And if it's visible, it might not even be enabled. So having those different statuses gives your test the right pacing to make sure things are being, done in an appropriate manner and as timely as possible too.
And what's extract do?
Extract is actually one of my favorites. It allows you to draw data from the UI and treat it as a variable. So, managed products probably isn't a great example, but let's say I had a product ID that's unique to each product. And as I create a new product, it gets a unique ID. I could use extract to extract that ID at runtime at the point it's created, create a variable out of it, and then feed that into my test later on to maybe, let's say, go back and search for a product based on that product ID or something like that. So it's a really cool feature that gives you uh, variables from the UI itself.
Interesting.
Yeah, great questions. So in this case, we added this verify text contains. I'll take you just one level further. So with Test Studio, we talk about having like 4 solutions to every problem. The first solution is pretty much record it and do it like hit record and do what a user would do. The second level is use your highlighter to make your test more bulletproof by adding in verification points, right? This is going to make my test stronger and help me identify failure better because I'm putting in that extra step that says, after you click manage products, make sure we made it to that page before we then try to edit products or add products or whatever it might be. Um, so that's kind of the second level, is using this element highlighter and the quick steps, if you will. Quick steps are kind of the most common verification points you might use. But then to take you one step deeper, if we're going kind of that third level, that's where this build step comes in. And this is our advanced recording toolbar where you have some redundancy here. So exist, visible, content, those are things we already saw, right? But there's more here as well. There's things like I can validate certain attributes. I can validate stylistic things. So is it the right font, color, all sorts of stuff there. We can basically just click away. It's populating the current value for me. And I can just click add step and I've got that color verification
I
added.
think that'd be helpful with something like making sure a form is validating. Make
Yeah,
sure the
exactly.
validation is in red and it's, the class might be there, but we want to make sure it's actually applied in the browser and has the right values in it.
Yeah, exactly. You can even go down to image verification and verify the image itself as a pixel level image. Um, so that's another way you could work with that. There's a threshold here that you can work with as well. And then similar to that OCR, well, really the same function, but in a different location, is to draw text from, pull text from an image. Now, again, this example, we don't need to use OCR, but the fact that you have that, and also what's cool about it is we can focus in on a small part of that image. We don't have to have the entire image. So we can say, well, let's just verify like just this piece of it, and that can make it very specific, so that even in a large, again, type of canvas environment or something like that, you can pinpoint a certain area to do the validation on. There we go. So yeah, lots of cool things in here. There's more, right? There are things like hoverovers and drag and drops and scroll actions and JavaScript events. I mean, it could go on and on from here. And also, this has our common steps here, our DOM Explorer here as well. You can search the DOM if you'd like to, and inspect how things are laid out. And as you interact, I think it's just great. You can see it's actually highlighting up above, right? So this is that managed products over there, and here's the little icon next to it. And overall, this is the full looks like clickable drawer item and the list item itself. So all of those layers that make up your UI, you can pinpoint. From here, you could even right click and say, let's add this to my element list, or copy it to a clipboard or something like that. Oh, and I should mention too, for those sites that are constantly refreshing, there's a DOM lock. that you can
Oh,
use
there you
too.
go.
Yeah.
So if you have
It's
like a stock ticker or something that's changing all the time, you can kind of pause
exactly.
it.
Yep. That way you get that moment in time of the DOM so you can interact with that. So that's third level. So what do you think the fourth level might be for testing? So the first one was record it like a user would. The second, using the highlighter, adding some verifications in there to make it more robust. The third was the advanced toolbar. Got any guesses for the fourth?
Not sure.
Code it. So
Okay.
like
Yeah.
any good testing tool, you can code from scratch. You can see there's a coded step option over here. But what you can also do is you can use Test Studio to generate code for you as well. So you can take a step like this verification we added, and in our right-click menu at the bottom, you can see there is edit and code. So this will actually add a code behind file to my test. Open up the IDE. We have an IDE built into Test Studio standalone. And of course, if you're using the Visual Studio plugin, you're already in an IDE, right? But
Hmm.
this means for our users that are using the standalone environment, you don't have to have a Visual Studio license because we do provide the IDE built in. So what this does, I didn't convert the whole test. I actually just converted that one step. So it leaves back behind here this reference to the code behind file. And in that code behind file, and any other steps I convert will go into the same code behind file.
And you
But
get
as you
a
can,
nice little drop down there too. So if you have
yeah,
multiple methods in that class, you can toggle between them. And I've used that recently. That's a pretty handy feature.
definitely. Yeah, this is the output that we get. We do have IntelliSense built in as well to Test Studio. So as you're starting to type, you can interact with the IntelliSense and build out what you need. Over here, you can see it giving me syntax errors as well in the output. So we keep track of that, and the compiler, of course, will let you know if your build succeeded or not when you try to compile your testing project. So a lot of features that are here to help. And again, code is really one of those things that's, it's reserved for the cases that tend to be just more advanced than you need than a normal interaction per se, or where you want to do something fancier. Sometimes we'll see code being used for like setup and teardown routines for your tests. Maybe helper class files where you've got universal variables that you want to work with. So things like that. And that way the tests themselves aren't creating more technical debt since they're not usually needing much code. And it really will cut down on the burden I think that testing can create sometimes.
One thing I find interesting here is I've used this feature for doing some really niche stuff with changing the browser size on the fly. So what I ended up with is like a test fixture that pulls up other tests, and
Mhm.
it changes the browser size as it goes along with these tests. So what I essentially have in here is like one line of code that invokes a JavaScript method, and you can write in C sharp. Just like Blazor can do JavaScript interop, we can do JavaScript interop from here too. And it's just a couple little one-liners that it runs on the test fixture and loads up the other tests and changes their browser size on the fly.
Nice. That sounds pretty sharp, even though it's JavaScript.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised that it was as easy as it turned out to be.
That's awesome. Yeah, so we've really put together, I think, a pretty good tool set, to make it approachable. And you mentioned kind of having the test inside of a test. I'll show you a quick parent test here, where this is essentially what a lot of our tests maybe start to look like. This is a CRUD operation split up into 3 subtests, and I mean it really kind of has a lot of different examples in here, right? It's got comments. Comments are great in order to keep in touch with others that are coming across this test if you need to keep other people informed about things going on in the test itself. There's some timeouts. There's some check marks along the way, right? We're checking some grid sorting capabilities, and of course, we do have translators built in for our own controls. By all means, you can use Test Studio on any web technology, so it's not specific to Telerik. But with our own controls, we give you some added kind of bonus features. And this is example one. The Kendo grid sorting is set to false is a feature that's exposed through that translator. But that's a create test there, or what we would call test as step. This is actually what gives us the ability to create sort of a parent test like this that's calling these subtests, and we're not duplicating anything. Test Studio is really, really good at reusing stuff. So wherever we can, we'll reuse that.
So what might be an interesting case here for our Blazing Coffee app is to create kind of a setup test. So if you go to the Blazing Coffee app, Andy, there's the ability to change the theme of the app from light to dark.
Okay.
And you could also change the language. So we could essentially build a step to ensure that when we start running our tests, we've gone in and made sure that we've set the theme to a certain color so we don't get false negatives or something like that. Would that be a good use case for that, or is there a better way to do it?
No, we could certainly do that. So if we start up a test, let's go from scratch here. So I'll just grab the URL and close that browser window there. And here in Test Studio, I just started a blank test here. So to go from here, I'll hit record, drop in the URL, pick a browser to work with. I typically do a lot of my testing on Chromium just because I do all my other work on Chrome. And oftentimes with the testing browser, you're resetting it, you're clearing cache, you're doing stuff like that. So I typically like to have a browser that I simply test in. But again, these are cross browsers, so I can run this same test against all the other browsers too. All right, so we're live recording now. So where should we go first? Are we going to the cog over here?
Yep. If you click on the settings wheel, you'll get this page here. And right now it's set to auto select your theme. So if you were to change your OS theme from light to dark, you may inadvertently trigger some errors on like a image recognition or something, because it's going to change the color of buttons and some of the UI. So if you want to set that to manually default to the light theme, you can.
Ah, okay, I see. So
and then there's also a language select there. Now that one's not going to change unless you manually go in and change it on like the theme setting. It can kind of be based on like outside of the app environment. It's based on your system settings. So the language select, you would have to have gone in earlier and selected a different language for that to fail. But you could also use this to reassure that it is set on English.
Definitely. Yeah, we can add a quick verification here. And watch this as I pause on this element. You can see it comes up with this is my element highlighter tool. Again, we toggle it on. You can see that it identifies the span here at that bottom level, right? Just a generic span layer. But that's inside of a Telerik dropdown list. And you can see when I expose these quick steps, there's some of these bonus features we talked about, right? So is the list valid? Is it expanded or not? Is it focused? Is it, what's currently selected? Instead of just the basic enabled visible and not visible. So those are some of those kind of bonuses you get when you're using the Telerik controls along with Test Studio. But again, we can work with any third-party custom controls as well. All right, so we'll set that verification there. And go ahead and toggle out of my element highlighter and we'll go back. So let's see what kind of test we have so far here. Oh, you know what? I actually did not capture my cog. So let me do that. We'll run it real quick, make sure that this will fail, but I'm pretty sure it will. Now I'm still in that live recorder, but I'm going to go to the top step and do a run from here. So it'll go through that navigate step again as well, just to give us a fresh screen of that. Yeah, so as I suspected, it jumped over here to the drop-down list, and I inadvertently did not capture I think I still was paused maybe on my recorder
Hmm.
when I did that. So we'll see that fail, and going back, we can see that it did fail, and here are those failure details again, all that information for us to diagnose and treat the failure. But let me go back here. I'm just going to be careful and say, let me make sure I can find that span, maybe even go in and do a left click. And this is a different type of click than a quick step kind of click. This has a higher authority. So you'll see when I add that, it's a desktop command left click, right? Oops, and
Hmm.
I dropped it in the wrong spot. Let me make sure I put it up here where it goes. So that's going to be there. And let's see, we'll try a run from here. So just a couple different ways you can quickly add to your test here, find the step that's going to do the best job for that control set that you're working with or for that particular element that you're working with. And now we're passing.
Yeah, you can imagine how the theme and the language could really throw off some tests. So you might want to have this, as an upper level like parent test that you run before other
Yeah.
tests go off, or something that we run at the top of a test list before the rest of the tests get fired off. Um, these changes persist in the local storage of the application. So they're not in the, I don't think clearing the cache alone is enough to wipe those out. So this is a little bit more bulletproof than just trying to clear the browser cache before you go in and start getting false negatives.
Yeah. I think that's a smart way to do it. And you could even tuck this into, in our conditional logic, like an if else scenario.
Mm.
That's really common too with logins sometimes, where I'll typically write a login test that'll say, okay, go to the site. If you're already logged in, carry on, else log in. And have it actually, in that else clause, have it actually call a whole nother test. So, or sub test if you'd like to go with it that way. So I can actually
Awesome.
quickly say, with selecting a verification, I only have one in this test, which is that it's in English, right? So if it's in English, then we build an if branch and we build an else branch, and we can actually have it go in those different directions. Or we could even, using our test to step, maybe we've already got some pre-built stuff, like here's my login subtest here. We could say, okay, well, let's just drop this inside the if branch. So now I have an entire another test in that if branch. I could do the same for the else branch and really build sort of a choose your own adventure type of story along the way. Let me blow that up a little bit so you all can see that. What's great is these if statements are built using the verifications, right? So actually, once you've consumed the if statement in the verification, you don't need step 6 there anymore. It can be disabled or it can be deleted because now it's actually part of that if statement.
Oh, okay. Makes sense.
Yeah, so those are some great ideas. And I mean, I really love what Test Studio gives you that ability to think broader, think more advanced when you get to testing. And of course, the beauty that these tests have a great longevity. I mean, I have some old tests, and that's really a testament because uh, so many times, so many customers that I hear from say, when on other tools, we'd have an issue, we'd have a small change in the application, and all the tests would break, and they have to recreate them. And it's like, well, then your tests, they stay young. You're constantly creating them again and again. It's good to have a test that can age well, right? That can become,
Hmm.
really, the way I look at it is you graduate a test from a feature test to a regression test. And hopefully your regression test list just builds over time. And as you continue to build new features, those regression tests are just there to make sure everything's still great, everything's still okay that you built before.
So I linked folks in the chat earlier to the upcoming webinar. Is there kind of like a pregame highlights you want to share with us before we wrap up today?
Yeah, we're actually having a great reunion coming up on this upcoming webinar. Not that our reunion's not great, Ed, but um, it's been close to maybe 7 or 8 years. I'd say close to a decade almost that me and myself and Ramiro are going to be co-hosting a webinar together. So Ramiro is our director of Test Studio, been with us for quite a long time, and just a great addition to our team, and also going to be great to be on a session with him. I'm sure we'll have some antics and things that are going to happen there. But as far as features and what we're going to be focused on, those new step failure details, we're really trying to bring in a better workflow to understand what's broken and how to fix it when the tests are broken, right? And again, that mentality of don't throw it away and start over. These tests can be fixed, they can be adapted, they can be adjusted very quickly and easily. But also the other things that may be a little bit more under the hood, things like working on frame support. We've had frame support for years. We've just made it better. And of course, the new support for .NET Core 5 and 6 as well. So making sure that we've got the most modern support as people are modernizing their applications as well, right?
Yeah, and we're focused on the web here, but Test Studio also supports WPF as well.
Yeah, great to point that out. WPF testing, hopefully I'm waiting to see, but I may be able to even share some cool WPF tests from a customer on the Thursday stream that do some pretty cool things like drag and drop and turning valves on and off and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool.
And Curious Drive's saying he likes the scheduler that we have built into the test list, where you can basically go to a calendar and schedule when you want your tests to run, and you get a nice output too as well. It shows you when the tests ran and if they passed or failed, like a full report on those too.
Oops, wrong button. Sorry about that. Let me do this one. Yeah, that's a great thing. Oh, I know what I did. I left my code open over there and probably didn't put in a semicolon where I needed it.
And as I mentioned too, you can do a lot of this from within Visual Studio. I think some things are limited that you don't get in the standalone app. Am I correct? Like, I don't think the test lists are in Visual Studio, right?
Oh no, we have added the test
Is
list
that
to Visual
added?
Studio. Yeah, that is, and you can organize tests and test lists there, and that's important. I mean, test lists at the end of the day are where you're going to get your permanent results from. Also, where you're going to be calling a build operation. So these are all results from a scheduler. As you can see, I have a responsive test list as well. We do support responsive testing, where you can run your tests in different device layouts for your responsive web apps. So we can drill into a failure here and see,
Yeah,
what may have happened.
I like how you drilled in there. I was using that yesterday to troubleshoot something. So you went in at the top level of when it ran, and then it shows you kind of an overview of, one of these tests failed. You can drill right into the test to the same window that it's basically the same dialogue used to build the test, sans the editing tools. So you can find it really easy when you're trying to troubleshoot something.
Yeah, it's really good. And there's a report view, and obviously this was just a single test, so 100% fail on this one. But what I like about this is the comments. When you have a failure, there's a chance that failure could occur again someday. So one of the things I do with the comments is I'll make notes of like, oh, this was the issue, more details on it, or this is how we fixed it. And it really surprised me when I started doing that, how many times I was like, oh yeah, I remember this before. How did we fix it? And I was able to go back and look at the comments of a previous break and, remember how to fix it basically. So lots of great data here. And since we're showing off, we might as well go into the scheduler options real quick. We do have storage and scheduling built in, but I wanted to really show off this executive dashboard real quick too, since we've got a few minutes left. This is really one of those features that we released without much fanfare, but I want to put it on blast a little bit because it really, at the end of the day, this is what people want, right? This is what they want to see. We call it the executive dashboard for a reason, because usually the big bosses want to know, like, are we passing or failing? They don't need to know all of the necessary details per se, but they want a nice quick way to see the health of the applications. So this is a representation of different test lists. The last 10 runs of this list, as you can see, this is all pass. Here's that one I
Mhm.
just looked at that was a failure. Here's a headless. We do have our headless execution. So here's a headless test list where it was some passing and some failing. And you can even see multiple projects. And what's cool about this is you don't have to have a Test Studio license to access this view. So if you're creating and maintaining and managing tests, yes, you do need a license to do that. But to share the details and the results, we've made this available without a license. So as long as you have that main license to be sort of the parent that feeds the data, you can expose this and let all of your stakeholders see the health of the application. And just to drill into one of these real quick, we can drill in and see under view details the steps that went. These are actually multiple tests, right? Drill into the test. Here's the steps. Here's the log file for that as well. So all that data can be viewed without even having to jump into Test Studio. So I really picture this used a lot in retro meetings or in planning meetings. As you maybe have a release, you might come and look at this view, or even some of our customers have it up on a TV screen, so they can just see the constant flow of new results every throughout the day, I guess.
And where and how is this hosted?
It's hosted through the services that are part of Test Studio. We do have a MongoDB that runs our storage service, and these aren't required services. These are if you want to use our scheduler. So you would need this scheduling and storage server kind of turned on. There
Mhm.
is some SMTP relay settings in here too, so that you get email notifications when tests execute and
Nice.
whether they've passed or failed. So that lives here. It's one of the services that we provide in there as well.
That's awesome. I had no idea that was there. Like you said, one of those nice hidden gems. Shouldn't be hidden, but at least you're giving it some attention now.
Yeah, we'll definitely be working to unhide some of our hidden gems as well. We've got so many great features in this product, and I think the big challenge is knowing where to find those features, right? So
Mhm.
uh, that's really where we focused on providing the new workflow, the new failure information, make that easy for people to find and make it easier for them to understand what to use to fix their problems. So stay tuned for more of that.
So I was trying to see if I could get something up and running really quick. I might share my little pet project.
For
And
sure.
if I can get this on screen here, give me a second. It's running through a automated test, so it's kind of taking my control away from the the screen.
No, I know how that goes for sure.
It should be a pretty quick one though. But I have a little open source library that helps with adaptive and responsive rendering in Blazor, and we actually adopted similar APIs for Telerik UI for Blazor. So now you don't need this third party library, but if you don't have Telerik UI for Blazor, you can still leverage this for your responsive parts of your app, but it's tested with Test Studio. So I did some dog fooding on this one. So
Cool.
I'll share. You might get a hall of mirrors here for a minute, folks, while this comes up on the screen. But I've got my Test Studio here. And let's get back to the homepage here. I've got several steps in this test, or several tests within the project here. And this is the one I was telling you about, where it will go in and load the browser as a test fixture and then open another tab or another browser window and start testing within it. And this actually was really easy to set up, and then I created a test list for it. I used to have multiple versions of .NET in here. This may actually happen again as .NET 6 comes out for release. This is a preview of the latest version here. So if I hit run test, you'll see it come up and load this thing it calls a test fixture, and then on top of it, another window pops up, and we start validating that it's able to change the browser size and the right components are showing at the different window sizes. So it'll do several of these. And this is the one I was telling you, it's going to check for JavaScript errors in, because there's a lot of JavaScript interop in this component library. And what it's doing is each time it loads a page, that JavaScript interop has to mount. And if it doesn't mount correctly, then it's immediately going to throw an error because that's going to stop any kind of false negatives from getting through. If for some reason it's changing the size of the browser and some of the things are still matching, even though the code isn't running correctly, which can happen. And then there's some disposal issues that can come up with this code as well. So there's been regressions I'm testing against to make sure those don't get back into the library. So you'll see in one of the steps, it goes pretty fast, so it's probably hard to see on stream. But there's one that will test the construct and dispose methods of the unit under test here. So if we execute this one again, what you'll do is you'll see it click off to a blank page. And it says test dispose, and it comes back. What that's actually doing, if we go to the running app, you can see it a little bit better, is it loads up this page and checks for any JavaScript errors in the console. Then it goes and disposes. Anytime you go from one page to another in Blazor, it's going to dispose any components that were on that view that you're in. So it disposes it, checks for JavaScript errors again, and then it comes back to a different page, which loads another version of that component and checks one more time to make sure it can reconstruct it. So if there's any regressions in there, if I break any code that deals with the disposal of that component, it gets picked up by Test Studio.
That's awesome. You know, this reminds me of the project we've been working on, kind of putting together different examples like this. I'm wondering if you may be interested in adding yours in to that repo.
Yeah, I might be able to do that. This is all open source and up on my GitHub, so we might be able
perfect. To. There you go.
Yeah. I need to check and make sure. Matter of fact, I could do that here. I believe these are all the tests are checked in on the GitHub repo. Yeah, they're all in that project. So it is available online. You just need Test Studio to run it.
Sweet. Well, I think I know where to get one of those.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see if I haven't had another user pick that up and try to run the end-to-end tests yet. So if you validate those, run on, get the it works on my machine problem solved for me.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
For sure.
But yeah, this exercises all of the various features of the Blazor size component. And you can see it in a little bit slower motion here. It will actually resize the browser to different sizes and check these boxes to make sure that the highlighted area is correct on each of those screen sizes. So you'll see it snap to small, and it'll look into these list items to ensure that they're all indeed small, medium, large. And each one of these pages has a different purpose. You'll see this one, it seems a lot like this other one, but what's happening here is this one is a single instance of the component. And these are not only single instances, but they're children of another component. So it will check to make sure that being a child in that render tree doesn't affect these. Because again, there were issues in the past where one of these would remain large, the other, or one would be correct, the other two would be incorrect because they were children and it wasn't getting the right JavaScript registration to the event system. So it would get a little out of sync here, and now this tests to make sure that does not ever happen again. So there's a lot of things being tested in here that they were hard problems to solve through unit testing. There are unit tests in here as well. So I actually have JavaScript and TypeScript unit tests that run the individual code paths for these things. But when you start putting them in the browser and people start coming up with interesting ways to use your components, you'll see them nest them in pretty creative ways and wrap if statements around them, and things start getting disposed when you never expected them to be disposed. Then these type of tests really help with that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to playing with this.
Yeah. Was there anything else that you wanted to share with us today, Andy?
No, I think it's kind of the latest from this end, from the Telerik Test Lab.
And we've got posts for the URL up on chat here. It just went up a few seconds ago, so I won't post it again. But if you're interested in learning more about Test Studio, come check out Andy. Is it Thursday, was it?
Yep, it's going to be Thursday. It looks like Thursday at 11 Eastern.
Yep, I've got it right here. It's got a nice countdown there. 2 days, 22 hours left before you go live with that webinar. And you can jump in there. Our webinars are very heavily staffed with our engineers and folks from the teams that run those webinars. So if you have questions about Test Studio, that is the premier place to ask those questions and get live responses. Even though you'll see Andy and Ramiro on screen, we've got engineers behind the scenes, providing Q&A and helping out with that sort of thing. So you get a chance to hear from the engineers themselves on some of the questions you might have. So make sure you jump in there and check that out.
Perfect. Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Andy, for joining us. And this is Code It Live, where we have all sorts of live coding shows, and we don't do our progress specific streams very often. You'll catch all kinds of React, Angular, JavaScript, CSS, Xamarin. We do some VR on here, all sorts of stuff that we're streaming all of the time. And we'll make sure you hit follow on the channel and come back and see us again. With that said, thanks, Andy, and thank you, chat, for joining us today, and we'll catch you again soon.
Thanks, everybody.